All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Haley. We were having a couple of technical issues. So we are now live on YouTube, but not with the link that we were trying earlier. So if you go to our YouTube page, you should be able to find it. But anyway, welcome to Virtual Open Hours. Like I said, my name is Haley. We are here in Brooklyn Bridge Park, Conservancy's Environmental Education Center. And today we are going to be talking all about birds. We have some awesome guests that are going to be joining us from the Wild Bird Fund. But I thought we could start off with talking about some bird anatomy, parts of the bird and parts of the bird's body, and also some other really cool birds sounds and the types of birds that live here in our local area. So why don't we start off first with this really cool model of pigeon anatomy. And this is really awesome because we're going to be talking a lot more about pigeons with the Wild Bird Fund. So this shows you all the insides of a pigeon. Look at all of that crazy stuff, all the organs and bones and everything in there. So birds are incredible animals because everything about them helps them fly. Pretty much everything in their body is designed in a way or evolved in a way adapted for flight. Everything from the covering on their body, which I'm sure people know that birds have feathers on their bodies, down to the insides of their body, like some specialized parts of their organs and their bones. Birds' bones are hollow. Did you know that? So they're not solid, and that makes them really, really light, so they're able to get up into the air. Some other really important parts about the bird are all of their muscles, especially in this area of their body, the whole front, underneath side, because those are the muscles that connect to their wings. And that's why they have this really big bone down here in the bottom called their keel. It's just their sternum. We have a sternum that connects our ribs in the front, but it has this like keel, just like the underside of a boat, where all of those pectoral muscles can attach to, because they need those muscles to be super, super strong to be able to flap their wings and get up into the air. Birds have scales on their feet. Did you know that? Birds are actually the closest living relatives of dinosaurs. So, and they have some of the things that dinosaurs would have had, which is scales covering part of their body. So they're actually kind of more closely related to like the animals that live today that have scales, like reptiles. Some other things about birds. Pigeons, well, a lot of birds have this kind of gullet part of their body. On a pigeon, it's called a crop, that helps them digest their food before it goes down into their stomach. And the crop of the pigeon creates the milk that they feed to their babies. Pigeons make a sort of, it's called crop milk, but it's just partially digested food that they then regurgitate to feed their babies. So most birds will feed their babies that way. And the other really important thing about birds that helps them fly, well, are those feathers. So we can't really see too much detail here on this model, but I thought we could look at some actual feathers. So birds have a few different main types of feathers. They're flight feathers. So I believe this feather came from, do you know what bird this came from? I think it looks like a hawk feather, but I could be wrong. So on their wings, mainly they will have these flight feathers that are really long and strong and help them to catch air and get up into the air. They have this like harder part on the end that sticks into the skin, and birds actually molt. So all animals will shed or molt the outer covering of their body at some point, right? When we brush our hair in the morning, some of that hair comes out, our little pieces of our skin fall out throughout the day, and we regenerate new ones, right? Same thing with birds. They will eventually shed or molt and grow new feathers underneath. And they also have these downy feathers. So look at how light those are. And down feathers, as you might assume, are really important for staying warm. Some of you might have coats or pillows or comforters at home that are made out of down feathers, and those help keep you really warm, right? So they're much smaller feathers, and they have much more of a fluffy appearance to them, and all of that, those little fluffy parts of the feather trap air close to their body, which can then be, that air can be insulating and help keep their body warm. So that's the same sort of idea as us wearing layers in the wintertime. That air gets trapped in between the layers, and then our body heat will heat up, or our body will heat up that air and trap more of that warm air to keep us even warmer. So that's just a couple of basic things about bird anatomy. I'm gonna pass it off to Christina. She's gonna tell you some more things about local birds here in Brooklyn Bridge Park.
Hello, everyone. So now that we know a little bit about what birds look like, let's talk about some signs that will help us know that there are birds around our neighborhood, around our park. Of course, the most obvious thing is if you see a nest in a tree, that's a pretty good sign that you know that there are birds nearby. So I have a couple nests here that I want to show you. There's a pretty cool one. All the nests that you see today are nests that were found in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And no, we didn't go and like grab these out of trees and take them from the birds. Occasionally, nests will, by the wind, get knocked out of the trees, and we'll find them in really weird places around the park where you wouldn't expect a bird to be building a nest or leaving a nest. And sometimes we will collect them that way. Other times, birds actually abandon their nests if a predator is coming by. That might be one reason why a bird might go and look for another tree in another place to rebuild. And also some birds migrate. We have several birds in Brooklyn that are only partial visitors. They're here at certain times of the year. They'll build some nests and then they'll move on. And then we have these kind of leftover nests in various places in the park. So once again, I'm going to show you a close-up of this nest. You can tell a bird's nest from a squirrel's nest because bird's nests always have this deep hole in them. Even though this one looks a little messy, look at that stuff in there. It's crazy. What is a bird doing with some of these things that are definitely man-made? Well, they look for really anything that's on the ground around their habitat to use for building. And a lot of times that will be dried grasses, leaves, but other things that might resemble that or just might be laying around, they don't know the difference. They'll take those and they'll build with them too. So it's kind of interesting when we find these nests that have these non-natural materials in it. Clearly there's a lot of trash and pollution in some areas and the birds are picking that up. But a squirrel's nest doesn't have this deep hole like that. And the squirrel's a bit messier. They'll just gather some leaves, they'll kind of put them all in a big bunch in the kind of V part of where the two branches meet in the tree. And it's like they're sitting on a giant beanbag kind of, or they'll hide themselves in there. But the nest is a little more neat and orderly. You'll notice on this nest, there is on the bottom, if you can see some mud. I'm actually gonna show you one more nest that actually has a ton of mud on the inside there. I think you can see my reflection in it, but this nest is an American robin nest. And we know because of the use of all that mud, American robins tend to start their nest with the innermost layer being a more mud-like material, and then they take additional things that they can find. Again, you'll see some natural man-made stuff or non-natural man-made stuff in there too, but they'll take additional twigs, dried grass, and they'll do an outer layer. So there's a couple nests that you can actually see in this first one too, that there's an inner layer and an outer layer. And sometimes they use different materials for the inner versus the outer. So this is another nest that we found. This one's quite cute and tiny. The size of the nest can tell you a lot about what type of bird built this nest. So we know this nest belongs to a song sparrow, which is a slightly smaller bird than a robin. So it needs a slightly smaller nest. for its eggs and young. You can see this one is mostly dried grass. It's a lot more delicate too, which is why we have it in this protective casing. Now, one other nest that we have found that's pretty interesting is the gray catbird. So these three birds are pretty common birds of Brooklyn Bridge Park, and therefore the most common nests that we're going to find as well. And even though this one looks like it has some natural colors to it, all of that green stuff is actually plastic fibers. So again, another example of birds just using whatever materials are around them, and pretty good indicators that maybe we need to be a little bit more mindful of where we're leaving our trash and pollution, because these animals are taking it and using it maybe to their benefit, but also not really healthy for animals to be surrounded by all of these things. We certainly wouldn't want them to ingest it. Now, besides seeing nests and seeing birds, there's other ways that you can tell that birds have been around. Maybe you find their feathers on the ground, maybe you see some bird tracks, but knowing the calls or the sounds and songs that birds make is also pretty important. And if you are a birder, you probably know how to make some of the bird calls to try to attract them near to you. So we're going to go over a couple of the most common birds that you will see in Brooklyn Bridge Park and learn a little bit about those sounds that they make. So the first one up is going to be our sparrow. So there's different types of sparrows. We're going to talk specifically now about the house sparrow, because that's probably the most common sparrow that you'll find here in New York City. But there's also a lot of song sparrows, and that nest that I showed you, that was the song sparrow. So let's take a listen to what a house sparrow sounds like. So it's kind of sounds like a typical bird sound, right? They have that chip, 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 chip. Let's listen to one more time. Now, not all birds sound like that, though. For example, we have a bird called the European starling, a very beautiful bird. You can kind of see from this picture that it has some interesting coloration to it. If you look closely at those feathers, they have a bit of a bluish and purplish tint to it. It's really pretty. As the name suggests, these are not originally native to the United States, but they were introduced and they're here in just enormous numbers. So now they're pretty much a naturalized species here in New York City, the European starling. So let's get a listen to this guy. It's going to sound a bit different. One more time. Sounds like a lot of noise, right? A little chaotic sounding. That was possibly the sound of more than one starling at once, but you can tell that they do a variety of different noises rapidly one after another. Very different from that house sparrow. All right, back to our friend, the American robin. Now, I love American robins, and I love to talk about them at this time of year, especially because these are a bird that you're going to see here all year round. So if you have been looking out your windows or taking a walk in the park recently, it's possible that you have seen some robins, because they are still out and active. Now, you might be wondering what this thing I'm using here. It's kind of like a bird sound machine, and they're very useful. A lot of birders have them too, so that they can learn the sounds and try to mimic them. And we'll try a mimicking in a minute, but let's listen to the American robin. All right, that was a long one. Now, sometimes birders use things called mnemonics. I bet some of you have heard of mnemonic devices. What that means is you listen to something and you think of a way to easily remember it. So when you hear the American robin, some people say it kind of sounds, their sound sounds like cheerily, cheer up, cheerily. Let's hear it one more time and let's see if we can recognize that. Cheerily, cheer up, cheerily. Yeah. So if you're really good at some of these, I see birders, sometimes they go out and they're actually kind of mimicking those noises. All right, now our last one, and I think the one that is underappreciated is our rock dove. Have you guys heard of this bird before? Have you seen this bird before? Beautiful rock doves. You probably know it as the pigeon. So the pigeon's more scientific name is rock dove. Belongs to the family of doves. And we have a special guest with us here today that's actually going to tell us a lot more about pigeons. They're probably, I would say, the most common New York City bird. And there's actually a lot of cool facts and interesting things that we could be learning about these pigeons and about birds in general by studying pigeons. But before we pass it off to our special guest, let's take a listen to what pigeons sound like, or the rock dove. So that one kind of has like a more of a cooing sound. Coo, 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 coo. All right. So I would like to pass it over to some of our special guests that are here from the Wild Bird Fund. They're going to tell us a lot more about these rock doves, as well as stick around to the end and you might get the chance to see a couple birds and parts of the Wild Bird Fund facility. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to our friend, Michelle.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle, and I'm the co-director of education at the Wild Bird Fund. And I'm just going to start sharing my screen and talk to you all about pigeons because they're one of the most common birds that we see, and we sometimes don't think so much about them because they're so common, but they're really spectacular birds, and I want to share what I know about them with you. Let me share my screen and get this started. Okay, I hope everybody can see this. Let me just fix this up on my end. Okay. So, it's the wrong slide. 1 second, please. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. I'm going to escape that. I'm going to go back to, okay. What did I do here? Am I still sharing my screen? I am. Okay, here we go. Okay, there's my start. Okay, so the pigeons of New York, our wonderful wild neighbors. And as you can see, this pigeon is sitting atop of a building. Pigeons are,
hold on, Michelle, 1 second. I think you need to re-share your screen again.
Okay. Okay. Okay,
there we go. Yes.
Okay, very good. Let me just start play. Play slideshow. Okay, there we go. You're good now? Are we good now? Okay, I'm assuming that we are.
Oh, we're good. We're good.
Okay, great. Okay, so as I was saying, the pigeons of New York are our wonderful wild neighbors, and they make homes everywhere. You find them on top of buildings, in the street, in parks, on sidewalks. They are everywhere. And now it's not letting me move this. Okay. I'm having a problem with this. Oh, there we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, I work for the Wild Bird Fund, and the Wild Bird Fund is in Manhattan, and it is actually a place where we take in wild New York City animals. We take in birds of all kinds. There are like 355 species of birds that pass through New York or live here. And they get injured, they get hurt, they have diseases, they get orphaned. And so we take them in and we take care of them. Hopefully we are able to get them back out into the wild. And that process is called wildlife rehabilitation. So what we do with the Wild Bird Fund is wildlife rehabilitation. And we get in so many pigeons sometimes on a day like today, people stop on the street, they see an injured pigeon and they just take a taxi or a bicycle and they bring them up to us. And we love pigeons. They're one of our favorite birds. But when I speak to children, and even when I speak to families and adults, I ask, why do you love pigeons so much? They're so common. What's so special about them? So let me tell you. So there are so many reasons why to love pigeons. And one of the most obvious, although maybe people don't stop to look at them as carefully as others do, pigeons are beautiful. As you can see in this picture here, this beautiful pigeon has green and purple iridescent feathers all over his body. He's got these gorgeous bright red eyes. He's a very proud and handsome pigeon. But pigeons also come in a very wide variety of colors and patterns. And we call these colors and patterns morphs, the word morphs. So you may have seen, this is a very common morph that we see around, but sometimes pigeons come in a color just white. Sometimes they have these reddish colors, mixed colors, or are mostly gray with just, white on their back and this dark gray, almost this dark color, this dark gray. Maybe they look like they're sort of being painted, and then they have this iridescence on top. And there are other variations and even fancy pigeons, which we're not going to really go into during this PowerPoint, but you might see when you visit the clinic later on in this presentation. So pigeons are beautiful. But they're also really, really interesting birds because they're super, super smart. Now, you might say, this is silly, birds can't read the alphabet, but in fact, they can. Birds can recognize and can identify all the letters of the alphabet. They can also count up to 9. They are also able to do something pretty special, which is they can actually detect cancer cells, which is pretty astounding. Certain other animals can detect cancer cells too, like dogs who have a really sharp sense of smell, and they can actually sniff the cancer cells. And so they are very helpful in that way. They can detect them before doctors even find them. But pigeons don't have that kind of a sense of smell, certainly not like a dog. But they have an incredible vision. They have really, really excellent vision. Their vision is so keen that they're actually able, when they're shown a piece of tissue like this, they can actually identify if this tissue has a cancer cell on it or not. And if it doesn't have a cancer cell, they actually peck the yellow bar. And if it does have a cancer cell, they peck the blue bar. And they've been trained to be able to identify them because they're able to be trained and learn new things. So pigeons are really smart animals in so many ways, and probably in ways we still haven't even found out about. Another reason why I personally love pigeons so much is because they're really, really affectionate birds. What you see here is pigeons basically saying, I love you to their mates. They kiss, they take their beaks and they clean each other. There's a word we use, it's called preening, Preening. They preen, and they love to preen each other on their heads, because if you're a pigeon, you can get almost every part of your body, but you cannot preen the top of your head. And it's really hard to preen behind your ears and stuff. So very often you'll see pigeons, and other birds too, preening each other in areas where the actual bird can't go. And it's a real sign of affection. I would even say love. And it's a way that birds bond. And they mate for life. So if there's a male and a female together, pretty much they're going to stay together until one of them passes away. So another reason why we love birds so much is that they're really amazing parents. What you see here is a beautiful pigeon taking care of its pretty newborn. They're only about maybe not even a day old pigeons. Both the parents will help to make the nest. Both the parents will feed the babies. They just feed them during different times of the day, And as Haley was mentioning to you, they have this thing called a crop. She showed you this crop when she showed you that model. And this is where the pigeons make this special kind of milk that they have. And it's not milk like a cow makes. It's not the milk that you might drink, or a goat or a sheep. It's a special pigeon nutritional milky substance that they make in their crop. And then they sort of regurgitate it after it's ready. It's full of nutrition. It comes up, comes out of their beak, and they put it into their little babies' mouths. And the babies get all this really good nutrition from the mommy or the daddy. So I wanted to just show you, because we very, very rarely see pigeons, because we don't even know where to look for their nests. They're very secretive. The mommy pigeon is called a hen. Usually they lay 2 eggs, and you can see here's one egg that has not yet hatched, and here's the other egg that has just hatched. The baby's still wet. Its little fuzzy downy feathers are still wet. It hasn't even gotten really out of its shell yet. This is it when it is fully hatched. Now, this is in a human's hand, because this little guy was found basically as an egg, and it hatched at the Wild Bird Fund, and it hasn't even opened its little eyes yet. This part of its beak is called an egg tooth, and it's called that because it uses it to sort of peck and break open the shell from the inside, as you could see in the other picture. And it's brand new. It's a brand new baby. Now, this little guy is just 1 day old. He's all dried out. You can see all those downy little fuzzy yellow feathers. And he sort of looks really weird. He looks like a little prehistoric animal. And he kind of is, because pigeons have been around for a really, really long time. It hasn't changed much in the time that they've been on this planet, on this earth. But now you can see he's got this really big beak that eventually he's going to grow into, and beautiful black eyes. And this is a 1 day old. Here you can see at 5 days old, they grow pretty fast, right? So he's got these guys have got, they still have their downy feathers, but they're beginning to change. They're starting to develop what we call pin feathers. And all of these things, they're sort of made of, they're surrounded by the same material that makes up your fingernails. It's called keratin. And eventually those are going to grow into his real feathers. And you can see the beak is grown and their eyes are open. And this is them at 5 days old. Now here are these guys at about 10 days old. You can see they're really chubby. They've put on a lot of weight. They've gotten rid of most of the yellow, and they just have a little yellow down still on their heads. Here are their wings, here are their little toes, and this is at 10 days old. And here they're about 20 days old. And at this point, you can see that most of their feathers have actually grown in, but they're still really small. They're still in the nest. They still cannot survive on their own. Their beaks are still pretty knobby and big. And you notice that their eyes are still dark. They still have dark eyes, although now you can see the pupil. Now, when the babies become old enough to leave the nest, we will call them fledglings, as opposed to nestlings when they need to be in the nest. And when they're fledglings, they're old enough to be out of the nest. And by the time a baby pigeon has grown up enough to be out of the nest, it's almost really difficult to tell that they're a baby. But one of the giveaways is that a young pigeon, a fledgling pigeon, or a juvenile pigeon will still have darker eyes. So you saw how black they were when they were born. And as it gets older, it will become less and less dark. They'll get more and more brown. And then when they become adults, then they have those gorgeous orange red eyes. So if you see a pigeon that still has this brownish or dark eye, you know it's really relatively young. Once they become adults, it's very easy to tell because they have those orange eyes. So at the Wild Bird Fund, I mentioned to you that we rehabilitate or take care of a lot of injured, sick, and orphaned babies, or birds in general. And we get lots and lots of pigeons. In this case, all of these little birds are different ages. As you can tell, this is an older bird. This is a very young baby. This is a young squeaker. It's still not an adult. We call them squeaker because they squeak, squeak, squeak. They make a lot of noise calling their parents. People find them and they bring them to the Wild Bird Fund, right? So here are three of different ages that we get at the Wild Bird Fund. Again, you notice that they're very young here, just out of the egg. Here they have their beginning, they're to get those pin feathers that are surrounded in keratin. And here's one that's a little older that has the feathers, but he's still a baby. And again, you can see those black or very dark eyes and those big knobby beaks. Now, here we're taking care of some older pigeons because not only do we get orphaned pigeons and young baby pigeons that are sick or injured, we get adult pigeons that are injured or sick. Like this little guy who you can see his leg is being bandaged up. This little pigeon obviously has something wrong with it, so it can't eat. And so our rehabber here is using this tube to get food down into his crop so that he can digest his food until he's ready to eat. Here you can't really see it that well, but there's a syringe. The syringe is filled with food. This tube is attached to the very end of the syringe. And when the syringe is pushed up, it goes down the tube and right into the body. And so he can get all the nutrition until he's able to live on his own. Here's an example of an x-ray that we took of a bird, a pigeon that came in. This is an actual pigeon. This is what they look like. These are their bones. Here's their stomach. This is their neck, and their arms look very similar in a sense to our arms. And this animal you can see right over here has a break. You can see in this leg, there's one solid, well, the bone itself is not solid, it's hollow, as Haley mentioned, which is why they can fly so easily. But here you could see it's broken. So this guy had a broken leg. So when we get these little animals with broken legs and with broken wings, depending on where the break is, there are certain breaks that can heal really well. Because they're hollow bones, the hollow bones can heal pretty quickly. So here we wrapped a wing that was broken, and this will heal in a few weeks. And this little bird also had a broken foot or leg, and this one too. So there's ways that we can wrap them so that they can be almost as good as new. Now, one of the things that happens to our little pigeon friends is, there are a lot of things that are dangerous to them in New York City, because after all, humans share this space with them, and they share this space with us. And things that seem like they'd be perfectly okay for us can really, really be dangerous for our pigeon friends and other birds. And one of those things is string. Now, it's really weird that birds get caught in string, but also in human hair, believe it or not, but they do. And at the Wild Bird Fund, we see these birds all the time. And what happens, sometimes the mommy birds don't realize it and they bring string to the nest. And so the babies actually get caught in it when they're really young. Other times birds walk in it and then it gets caught in their claws. And when they try to get it off with their beak, it just gets tighter and tighter, like in this situation here, where it's so tight, it's actually embedded in their flesh. It's really painful. We get a lot of these birds. And so one way you can help is by making sure that if you ever have string or balloon string or anything like that, you throw it out properly. Unfortunately, people put out what we call glue traps. Many of you probably have seen them before, and they're actually, you can buy them in stores, and people put these out. They're covered with really sticky glue. And unfortunately, people put them out for rats and mice, which is, very cruel to rats and mice as well. But unfortunately, they also capture birds of all kinds. We've seen sparrows, and I've seen kestrels, which is a type of falcon. We see pigeons and other birds that get caught because maybe they see food on it. They go to get the food, when they see something on it, or they just land on it because they don't see it, and then they get completely stuck. So we have to take off these, we have to take the birds off very carefully to make sure that we don't hurt them. And So you can actually help in that regard by not using glue traps. And if you have rodents that you don't want, then you can use a trap that doesn't hurt them, but just sort of traps them, and then you can put the rodents outside. And another thing that we see a lot of is baby birds that have been caught by cats or even by dogs. So if you have a cat or a dog, if you leave your cat inside, which is better for your cat too, or walk your dog on a leash, then there's no chance that they can take these. They don't mean to hurt them, it's just their instinct, but they do hurt them, and they're really dangerous to these animals. Another thing you can do to help all of your animal friends, including the birds and the fish and the whales and the turtles and all the birds that fly, including our pigeons, is that when you have balloons, like for a happy birthday, when you don't release them, because when you release them, they lose their air, they fall down, they fall onto trees, they fall in rivers, they fall in the ocean, and animals get caught. So either throw them out properly or cut up the string, and please be careful of how you discard of your plastic, because it's really bad for the animals of all kinds. So what I've hoped to do in this very short presentation is just give you an introduction about how beautiful, affectionate, smart, and special our wild neighbors are, our pigeons. And hopefully you'll have some additional respect for them and know how to keep them safe from harm, and maybe watch them and learn a little bit more about them. And I think that's the end of my piece of the presentation. And I would like to introduce you to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to introduce you to Lisa, who's going to talk to you about what you can do if you find an injured bird.
All righty, there. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you this snowy afternoon. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Haley and Christina. So let's see. So the Wild Bird Fund, as you now know, cares for injured, ill, and sick wildlife and orphaned wildlife. So let's learn a little bit about the basics about bird rescue. I am going to start sharing my screen. Let's see if I get that going. All righty, there we go. Okay, so everyone, have you ever found an injured bird? Have you ever wondered how you can help an injured bird? So here's what you can do. One of the first things that you want to do is be observant. So there's injured birds actually all around us. We just need to be observant, and we can be helpful that way. So you may find an injured bird on the street. Maybe it was hit by a car going by. You may find an injured bird on the side of a building. That's not really normal for them to be huddled against the side of the building. Perhaps during migration, they had a collision with the window or the building, and they have a little bit of a concussion, so they might be sitting there listlessly. You may also find an injured bird in the park. Perhaps it was attacked by a predator, or a cat, or a dog. So we want to be observant about this, so we can first find these injured animals. Next, to be a bird superhero, we want to remember these 3 steps, or 3 S's, as I say. So there's signs that we can look for. It's secure, we'll talk about that, and shuttle, we'll talk about that word also, the 3 S's. So the first one, let's see, okay, is the signs. So we're going to look for signs that the bird is injured or ill. How can we do that? If it's huddled against the wall, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Maybe the bird can't fly. That's not normal. We know that birds should be able to fly unless they're a baby bird. Swollen eyes, that doesn't look right. They should have bright, shiny eyes. Puffy feathers, that's also a sign that the bird is trying to get some warmth, not really feeling so well. So some other signs might be bleeding. The bird might have an injury, a puncture wound. The bird could also have some deformity on the feet, so it wouldn't be able to perch. If it was trying to fly, it wouldn't be able to perch. So those are signs that we're going to look for, that the bird isn't really feeling too well. And these are signs telling us that the bird needs help. The next one, in order to be, again, that bird superhero, is secure. You're going to need to pick up and secure the bird. So this doesn't sound as scary, you know, it maybe as it sounds. The first thing, you want to have a couple of supplies, hopefully handy. And the first one would be to have some sort of a small towel, a washcloth, even maybe a large napkin from if there was a restaurant nearby. And you want to gently approach the bird from behind, try not to scare it. And you also want to remember the birds, you're trying to be helpful, you're trying to rescue them, but they're not going to look at it that way. They're going to look at it as you're a predator trying to get them. They don't want to be trapped. So by grabbing by the hands, by having a little blanket or a small towel, this makes them feel a little bit more secure. They do have hollow bones, as Hallie was mentioning earlier, so we want to protect those. And this wraps it up like a little bundle, like maybe your baby brother or sister would have, keeps them all nice and warm and secure. The next thing that you would want to have is some sort of container. It could be a box. It could be, we've had birds come in. I had one in a little French fry container. It was a baby bird, little McDonald's French fries. It could be a shopping bag. Put some newspaper or paper towels in there. And you want to keep that bird secure and warm and quiet. Again, they don't respond to you. Wild birds don't respond to you talking to them or trying to pet them or cuddle them. They're afraid. They're wild birds, they're wild animals, and they feel like you're a predator. So you don't want them to go into shock. You want to keep them calm and quiet, and then put them into that box. The next thing you want to remember is it's very tempting, but no food, no water. Different birds have all different diets. Some are going to eat insects and worms, and some are going to be seed eaters. So you don't want to upset that balance. You don't want to give them, even if it's a hot day, you want to let the professionals handle that. You don't want to give them what are birds drink differently. They have special ways they drink, and you wouldn't want to risk the bird choking or having damage to their lung area. Okay, after securing the bird, the next thing you want to do is shuttle the bird to a wildlife rehabber as soon as possible. Time is really critical there, because think about it. If you're not feeling well, you want to get to the doctor as soon as possible. If you call 911, you want the ambulance to come right away. You don't want to lose time. So same thing with the bird. As soon as it's practical or possible, you want to bring that injured bird or ill bird to a wildlife rehabber or the Wild Bird Fund. We're on 565 Columbus Avenue. And I believe you can also call, there's 311 is a number that you can get additional help. And there are, if you also looked online, there's other animal rehabbers like the New York City Audubon that can help out. But yeah, so that's important to get your bird to the clinic. Let's talk about going to the Wild Bird Fund now. And the next thing you might be wondering is, what happens? Okay, so you rescued the bird, you brought the bird to the Wild Bird Fund. Well, what happens then? So we have a very special treat for you. Rachel, who is a Wild Bird Fund educator, is here with us today, live from the Wild Bird Fund. And Rachel will hopefully be able to show you behind the scenes at our clinic, and maybe you'll even get to meet some of our patients. Okay, let me stop sharing and let's see if Rachel is ready for us.
Hi, can you guys hear me? I'm Rachel. I'm one of the staff members at the Wild Bird Fund. I'm at work tonight downstairs in the clinic where we keep a lot of our pigeons. And we also have a section of songbirds also. But I'm going to introduce you tonight to some of our pigeon patients. First of all, this is Rumble. He's a checker pigeon. You can tell that by his sort of checkered coat or feathers. And when a pigeon comes in, we will assess it, but we will also give it a name and a name tag. You can kind of see that his name is written on this piece of tape. And frequently, the bird is named after the rescuer. So if you end up rescuing a bird, you might end up having a bird named after you that we are caring for. And Rumble came to us over the summer last year. The rescuer who found them noticed that they had a hurt foot. They actually had something called bumblefoot, which is a bacterial infection that can affect birds. And the rescuer ended up keeping Rumble for quite a while, and Rumble got a little bit too used to people. So Rumble is actually a bird that we are going to adopt out because Rumble actually really likes people and is not one that we can release back into the wild, unfortunately, because she loves to sit on people's shoulders and heads and, you know, check out what you're doing. So this is her, and actually let her fly. See if she wants to take off. There we go. And I also want to introduce you to another type of pigeon. This is Lady, who just came to us recently. You can see she looks a lot different than Rumble does, and she's actually a fancy pigeon. So just like there are a lot of different dog breeds that people will breed pigeons for different qualities, or breed dogs for different qualities, people also breed pigeons for a lot of different qualities. So this particular pigeon is just a very attractive one, I think. She has these light eyes, and when she came to us, we could tell that she belonged to somebody because she had these bands on her legs. So she probably was somebody's pet, and maybe they decided they didn't want her anymore. She was found, I believe, in Lower Manhattan. And another bred pigeon I want to show you is a homing pigeon, and maybe you guys have heard about these. Homing pigeons are able to, this one's a little less tame than the other pigeons. Homing pigeons are able to find their way using the Earth's gravitational field. And people used to use them for centuries, actually, before there was internet or before there was the phone, to deliver messages. People would actually use them in ancient Egypt, sort of as like a postal service. And then I believe they were also used in the Olympics to tell who had won certain races or competitions, and also used during wartime to send messages. So homing pigeons are really cool. They're a little bit bigger than your average pigeon, and you can kind of see that they have a different profile with their heads, different beaks. And this one's really beautiful, although he does not like to be helped, with his feathers. So he's a really cool pigeon. And next, I'll be right back. We have a lot of different birds, and we sometimes also have ducks. And this is a domestic Muscovy duck. These ducks in the wild version are native to Central America, South America, and Mexico. And I believe this guy was found on the sidewalk when he was a lot smaller in Queens. So someone must have, abandoned him, unfortunately. And he would not have survived on his own as a baby. The cool thing about Muscovy ducks is they have very sharp claws. You can kind of see his claws here. And they actually can climb trees. They sometimes build nests in trees, and they sometimes will also sleep in trees overnight, which is an unusual adaptation for ducks. And then we could just take a little peek at the clinic really fast. You can see we have all of our patients are in different cages with their names and a tag showing, what's going on with them, so we can easily figure out who is who and what kind of medical care they have. You can see we have some pigeons that are out flying around right now. They all get different times flying. We have another fancy pigeon up here. It's very, very pretty. And some other blue bar pigeons, like this one right here is a blue bar. The most common pigeon. So I hope you enjoyed this little preview of the clinic, little tour. I think that there is a way that you guys can ask questions. I think Lisa's jumping on now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. That was awesome. So I have a couple questions myself, and we'll see if anyone is watching on YouTube. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Now is the time for that. But you mentioned about the feet. I've noticed a lot of pigeons that have like missing toes or like these deformed looking feet. So is that's a bacterial thing? Because I've also heard people say that it's frostbite, and then when Michelle was showing the string caught in the feet, maybe it was from that, but you said it's a bacterial thing.
Oh, usually the missing toes is because they've gotten string or hair wrapped around their toes, and over time that will wrap around tighter and tighter, and sometimes it will actually amputate the toe. We do get a lot of pigeons in for that issue, so it's always important to clean up hair and string and not leave it on the street, particularly with pigeons, because they spend a lot of time walking around the city, which you guys probably have noticed. So if they accidentally step on that hair, it can easily get wrapped around their feet. And that's a really common reason that we get pigeons in. The bumblefoot, which is what Rumble had, frequently affects chickens, sometimes waterfowl like swans, and occasionally pigeons also. And it's a bacterial infection caused by staphylococcus.
Interesting. Yeah, I was always wondering what was going on, and I'm sure other people have seen that before. So, I mean, otherwise it seems like those pigeons, even though they're missing some toes or might even be missing like most of their feet, most of them seem to be getting along okay, I guess. So otherwise, I mean, if they were looking at those other signs of sickness, maybe that would be a time to bring it in. But if they just have missing toes, it's just, there's not much you're going to be able to do for that anyway, right?
There are pigeons out in the wild that you will see with missing toes. Sometimes they need help if it seems like the toe looks infected or it looks painful for them, like it looks like they're having issues walking on it. But we have, treated pigeons and even had to occasionally amputate toes, and we will return them to the wild once their feet are all healed and they're able to be off of medications and flying fine.
Okay, so maybe some of those ones that people have seen have already been rehabbed and they're just released. Where do you release pigeons, or do you try to take them back to wherever someone found them and brought them into you? Like, I'm wondering how they find their family, or do they just like start with the new family when you release them in certain areas?
For pigeons, we frequently release in Central Park. Actually, we have a flock that we sort of release with, and we have locations that we like to release at. We usually bring some seed with us, and we will sprinkle a little seed and see if wild pigeons will come down for that seed. And if they don't, they may not be doing that because they see a hawk in the area, and that would mean that we should not release in that area and we should find another space. So we try to, make it a successful release. We also evaluate the pigeons and make sure that they fly off immediately and seem like they're comfortable with leaving. But that's typically where we release. Occasionally, we have a couple rescuers who like to release the pigeon themselves, and we do frequently work with people too that want to be a part of that release. And then for other birds, we frequently will release them either where they came from, or if that area is not a good release site, we find a different place to release them that's safer.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for showing us around. It looks really busy in there. All these birds are flying around. They're having fun. I didn't know there were so many different types of pigeons, the fancy pigeons and the big pigeons. That was really awesome to see. Christina, you have any questions? Or
I did. Yeah. Sure. I'll put that on. So I noticed that one of the pigeons that you were showing us was able to actually turn its head almost 180 degrees backwards, it looked like. Is that something normal for all birds, or are pigeons just incredibly flexible with their ability to turn their neck one way or the other?
A lot of birds actually have great flexibility in their necks. Owls particularly can really turn their heads almost, a full 360 degrees, but not quite. And pigeons, I think particularly because they need to be aware of predators potentially or food sources or danger, having like a really good flexibility can help them keep an eye on things around them.
Really cool. Well, I learned a lot about pigeons today from you guys that I did not know. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. Again, this was guests from the Wild Bird Fund. Please go to their website, learn more about them, and thank you all for tuning in. And I hope you guys all have a great day. All right, we're going to turn off. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, just
Good night.